Since March of 2020, most organizations have had to rethink how they do business, including how they engage volunteers in delivering services or providing behind-the-scenes support. While some organizational leaders have sustained a commitment to engaging volunteers, even if it looks different than prior to the pandemic, many have put volunteer engagement on hold entirely. Why? Because many leaders don't understand the connection between effectively engaging volunteers and organizational sustainability, which is why it's more important than ever that leaders of volunteers articulate the value and impact that volunteers have even amid challenging times. I'm Beth Steinhorn, President of VQ Volunteer Strategies. Research has shown that organizations that embrace effective volunteer engagement are more adaptable and sustainable even amid challenging conditions. And three characteristics in particular are associated with high-performing organizations: planning and development, effective training, and leadership support. Today's topic is how you can build leadership support to ensure your organization leverages volunteer engagement to survive and perhaps even thrive as we recover, reopen, and return. So what does it look like when leaders support volunteer engagement? I'll try and paint a picture. Volunteers are treated as partners in achieving mission and priorities. Senior leadership supports the role of volunteers in the organization by allocating resources, engaging volunteers themselves, and talking about it to all stakeholders, publicly acknowledging the work and impacts of volunteers. One of the key factors in ensuring those things happen is that the organization tracks and communicates volunteer value, impact, and outcomes. While safety protocols and restrictions of the pandemic transformed and certainly limited the ways that volunteers can serve our organizations, we now have an opportunity to rethink how we define volunteer recruitment, retention, and how we measure impact. Traditionally, many organizations tracked and reported only certain metrics to leadership. Maybe these sound a little familiar: number of volunteers, total hours contributed, and perhaps dollar value of the time contributed. Well, if those sound familiar, then chances are pretty good that your engagement metrics took a bit of a hit during the pandemic. Though certainly there are organizations whose engagement increased because they provide essential services like food assistance. As we approach reopening and return to more normalized operations, all of us should be telling a more complete story of how volunteers are driving impact for our organizations. That starts with defining relevant and realistic goals and then selecting appropriate metrics. A goal is your desired result. For recruitment, for example, we need to think beyond filling all available positions. A more meaningful goal might be recruiting a certain % of qualified candidates, or the number of current volunteers who step up to new leadership roles. On the other hand, a metric is a measurable indicator that reflects the efficacy of the strategy. Metrics answer the question, how will we know if we're successful? When we get beyond defining successful retention, for example, simply as the number of volunteers who stay in the same position year upon year, then we might look at metrics such as number of first-time volunteers who return for at least one more engagement, or the number of volunteers who stay engaged as donors or advocates, even if they can't serve in person due to health concerns. For more examples and a tool that you can use, download our Recruitment and Retention Goals worksheet from the Points of Light community or our VQ Volunteer Strategies website today. And remember, this is just the start of building leadership support for volunteer engagement. Use this work as a foundation for rethinking impacts and outcomes and value that volunteers bring to the organization. To learn more about leadership support, how to shift your culture around the value of volunteer involvement, and other aspects of becoming a service enterprise, contact Points of Light or your local volunteer center today.